I found out over burnt toast and a quiet morning. It was one of those gray-skied Sundays, the kind where the house breathes in slow exhales and the kettle takes too long to boil. I was standing in Mom's kitchen, still in the sweatshirt I'd slept in, when I heard her talking on the phone. Her voice was too loud for the softness of the day. She's 10 weeks now. The second round worked. Praise God, right? All worth it. She paused, laughter bubbling up her throat, the way it always did when she was talking about Lila. No. Tuition? Oh, honey, we just used the college fund. It was sitting there. And honestly, what's more important than a grandchild? I didn't hear the rest. I didn't need to. The toast popped up, dark and flaking. I left it in the tray. That fund had been the one promise they made to me when I turned 12. Dad opened it in my name after I got straight A's the whole year. They used to call me their bright one, before Lila's infertility turned her into something delicate, fragile, sacred. I stared at the butter on the counter until my vision blurred. My name was still on the jar in the fridge, but not apparently on the life I'd been building toward for over a decade. The rest of that day was a blur of motions without meaning. I did the dishes I hadn't dirtied. I folded laundry that wasn't mine. And I smiled when Lila came home, glowing, her hand already resting on her belly like it was royalty. I wanted to tell you sooner, she said, dropping her keys in the bowl I made in 9th grade pottery class. But Mom said you'd take it badly. She waited for me to congratulate her. I didn't. Instead, I wiped down the kitchen counter again, even though it was clean. You're going to be an aunt, she added with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Isn't that amazing? I nodded. My throat was a locked drawer, the kind you don't open unless you want everything inside to fall apart. Later that night, I lay awake on the couch, the one they said was temporary until my dorms reopened. Only my dorm key didn't work anymore, because I wasn't going. Back there were emails I hadn't opened, calls from the university, deadlines I missed, questions no one in this house seemed concerned with. Instead, they were painting the spare room yellow, and Lila was choosing names. When Mom finally mentioned it, 3 days later, it was in the laundry room. Like it was just another load of whites. We needed the money, she said gently, not meeting my eyes. You're smart. You'll find another way. I folded my hoodie, the one I wore on campus before I ever knew what betrayal smelled like. Another way, I repeated, as in loans, or a community college closer to home. That might be better anyway. You're grounded here. Grounded, like a child. Like a plane with no wings. Like someone they didn't trust to fly. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the detergent bottle against the wall, though my hands itched with the weight of it. Instead, I went to my room. No, the couch. And I opened the family group chat. Lila had just sent a sonogram photo. Everyone replied with hearts and praise hands. My cousin asked when the baby shower was. I didn't answer. I scrolled up, past birthday messages, past the photo of the Thanksgiving turkey I cooked alone, past the group selfie they took without me at Dad's retirement party. And then I tapped. Leave group. No announcement. No explanation. Just silence. Just me. The paint fumes hit me before the morning light did. Lila had cracked open the windows in what used to be the guest room, now the nursery. The curtains were gone. My old bookshelf was gone. Even the crooked photo of our childhood trip to the lake, the one where I was holding her hand because she was afraid of boats, was gone. In its place, A crib she didn't build, a chair she didn't buy, and sunlight that somehow made it worse. I stood in the doorway with a cup of stale coffee, watching her hum along to a song on her phone, barefoot, glowing. She hadn't seen me yet, and for a brief moment I pretended I was someone else. A stranger, someone just passing through. She turned, her face blooming when she saw me. I was going to wait, but, "Do you want to feel the baby kick?" She took my wrist before I could answer and pressed my hand to her stomach. I didn't feel a kick. Just warmth, just skin, just everything I'd never get back. Downstairs, Dad was making pancakes like it was still 2008, before he stopped asking about my classes, before he started calling Lila our miracle. He flipped one toward me with a grin. "Sweetheart, eat. You've lost weight." I sat down, because standing made my legs shake. The room smelled like syrup and lies. Mom was scrolling through her tablet at the table. "We're thinking of doing the shower in May," she said. "Maybe something outdoors. And we want you to make a little scrapbook. Something personal from you to the baby." Dad nodded, like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. I swallowed hard. "You want me to make a scrapbook?" I said. Slowly, "For the child you stole my future to create?" Silence, sharp and clean, like a snap of winter air inside the room. Lila came down a moment later, rubbing her belly like she was the Virgin Mary. She could always sense tension. She was allergic to it. "I know this is hard for you," she said, "but can't you be happy for me? Just try?" She wasn't asking. She was instructing. Like happiness was a button I hadn't pushed hard enough. Like love was a jar I forgot to open. I took my pancakes and left them on the porch. Cold syrup on cold china. I sat there until the birds stopped singing and the air turned still. The backyard looked smaller than it used to. Everything did. That night, I opened my old school folder from high school, still tucked in the bin under the couch where my backpack used to be. I found the acceptance letter to Emerson, the one they framed for 2 weeks before they took it down to hang Lila's pregnancy announcement. I ran my thumb over the embossed seal. They'd offered me a scholarship, but it wasn't full. They said they'd cover the difference. They promised. I folded the letter back up, placed it under my pillow, and lay down in silence. Outside my door, my couch, my borrowed hallway. Lila was humming again. The yellow room was glowing, and all I could see behind my eyes was the version of me that almost existed. I started keeping a list, not on paper, not in my phone, just in the soft, aching place between memory and exhaustion. I kept it like a slow chant. A litany. A way to keep from disappearing. The night I stayed up editing Lila's nursing school application, while mine went untouched. The time she forgot my birthday, because her dog had a toothache. When Mom told me not to cry so loud after. My rejection from Brown, because Lila was trying to nap. That I was there when her first embryo failed. Held her hand, wiped her tears. That no one even told me the second round had begun. Each memory settled into place like a rock in my throat. Quiet. Heavy. I carried them everywhere. By midweek, I stopped answering when Mom called me for dinner. I started eating late, after they'd gone to bed. Cold rice, leftover stew, bread that had turned stale on the edges. The house creaked in a different way when it was empty of their voices. And I liked that. It was the only time I could hear myself think. On Friday, Lila cornered me in the hallway while brushing her hair. "You're being cold," she said, "and honestly, it's making things harder than they need to be." I stared at her expensive maternity robe, at her polished nails, at the girl who used to beg me to braid her hair and now couldn't meet my eyes without a mirror nearby. "You think this is easy for me?" I asked quietly. "I think you're choosing to make it harder." That night I Googled, "Can I still go to college if my parents spent my savings?" Then, "How to legally prove financial misuse." Then, "How much does quiet cost?" Because I'd decided something, not rage, not revenge, just space. I called the admissions office at Emerson 2 days later. I used a soft voice. Careful, professional. The woman on the line was kind but tired. She told me I'd missed re-enrollment, that my spot had been marked as withdrawn. "Is there any way to reverse that?" I asked, gripping the phone like it might dissolve. She hesitated. "There may be options, but you'd need new financial paperwork. A new plan." A new plan. Not a miracle. Not a family. Just me. When I hung up, the silence around me felt different. Not painful. Just empty. Like a space waiting to be filled with something of my choosing. I took down my old backpack from the closet that now held Lila's coats. Inside were printouts of essays I'd written, notes I'd scribbled on Post-its, a keychain from campus orientation, a dried flower from the tree outside my dorm, and beneath it all, folded into a pocket I forgot existed, was a receipt from the deposit I'd made on my dorm. $1,000. All mine. All gone. I stared at the paper until the ink looked like smudges. Then I folded it once more and lit it in the sink. Watched it curl. Watched it vanish. They had taken something from me. But I still had something they didn't expect. Time and silence and the will to start again, just not with them. I started working nights at the bookstore downtown. No one asked me to. No one even noticed, really. I told Mom I was volunteering at the library, and she nodded like that made sense. Because to her, anything I did that wasn't about Lila was either a phase or a distraction. But the bookstore had quiet corners, lamps that glowed like old memories, the smell of dust and paper and forgotten things, and best of all, no one there knew I'd failed. They just thought I liked alphabetizing shelves and restocking journals. I did. Because at least when I touched something there, it stayed touched. Mrs. Patel, the owner, gave me hours because I didn't talk too much and I always showed up. "You're reliable," she said once. That's rare. Reliable. Not brilliant. Not sacrificial. Not invisible. Just someone who shows up. I think I cried in the break room after that. Silently, behind a half-broken Keurig machine and a box of expired biscotti. Lila texted me the same day to ask if I could pick up nipple cream and prenatal vitamins. No. Hi. No. How are you? Just a list. Like I was still the assistant to the miracle. I left the message unread and turned off my notifications. That night, I packed a small bag, not to run away, just to feel like I could, inside, my favorite sweater, 2 poetry books, a disposable camera I found in the drawer. My passport, even though I had nowhere to go, it stayed under the bed like a secret, like proof I still had choices. On Saturday morning, Mom called me into the kitchen. Her hands were folded like she was at church. "We've been thinking," she began. "And maybe it's time you started looking for something more permanent. A job, maybe. A certification. Something reasonable. Lila sipped orange juice beside her, eyes cast downward like she wasn't the one who'd erased the other path. "We can't support you forever," Dad added from behind the paper. "You're not a kid anymore." My mouth twitched. They hadn't. Supported me for months. They hadn't even noticed the shifts I picked up, the savings I'd started rebuilding, the night classes I'd quietly registered for at the community college, all while they talked about names for a baby I didn't ask to meet. "I understand," I said. And for the first time, I meant it. They had drawn the lines, given the crown. Built the nursery. I'd let them, but I didn't have to stay inside the picture anymore. Back in the living room, Lila was showing Mom a Pinterest board for the baby shower. "You'll help decorate, right?" she called out to me. "You're still creative." I didn't answer. I just walked past them with my sweater in my hand and my silence in my mouth. In the hallway, I opened my email and clicked confirm on a local studio art class I'd bookmarked months ago, paid with money I earned. For a future. They hadn't written for me. It was the second Sunday in May, Mother's Day, and Lila's baby shower. The front yard was full of chairs wrapped in pale ribbon. Lavender and cream. Plastic champagne flutes lined the folding tables, glinting under a sun too bright for comfort. I watched from the upstairs window as guests trickled in. Distant cousins, Mom's church friends, women with bracelets jangling, and sunglasses perched like crowns. Lila looked radiant, of course. They always do when everything bends around them. I hadn't been asked to help decorate after all. Maybe they sensed it. Maybe silence has weight. Maybe ignoring a group chat leaves echoes. Still, there was a card with my name on it next to the gift table. Blank inside, a passive-aggressive kindness, like a seat at a table you were never meant to stay at. I didn't sign it. I didn't go downstairs. Instead, I sat at the foot of my makeshift bed, the couch, always the couch, and started quietly sketching. Charcoal, heavy lines, a figure standing under a gray tree. No baby. No balloons. Just a girl with too many shadows, and a hand pressed flat to her own chest, like she was trying to keep her heart from slipping out. Laughter drifted in through the open windows. Shrill, performative. Someone clinked a glass and shouted for a speech from the mother-to-be. I turned the music up in my headphones, muffled the joy, softened the betrayal, drew until my hands hurt. When I finally stepped out that evening, after the plates were cleared, the guests had left, and the glittering scraps of wrapping paper littered the lawn. I walked barefoot across the grass. No one noticed. Lila was upstairs already, cradling some expensive onesie. Mom was washing wine glasses, humming. I stood by the back fence, the one Dad never fixed. Just looked out toward the darkening sky, and I thought, they never once asked what I lost, only what I could give. That night, I placed a single envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside, a print of my charcoal sketch. The title scrawled beneath it. What you took. No note. No name. Just the weight of unspoken things. Later, I heard Mom's footsteps pause in the kitchen. Then the sound of paper being set gently down. No conversation followed. Just cabinets opening. Then silence. The next morning, no one mentioned the drawing. But Mom looked at me a little longer than usual over breakfast. And Lila didn't ask me to help organize her nursery anymore. I'd like to say it felt like power. But really, it just felt like a clean cut. The kind you don't bandage, the kind you let scar. Summer came in slow waves, heat pressing through the curtains, the hum of an old fan rotating lazily in the hallway, the drone of lawnmowers in the distance. By July, Lila's belly had grown round and full, and the house began to speak a new language. Diaper brands, feeding schedules, names that sounded like they belonged to trust funds or children in French picture books. My name wasn't spoken much anymore. Not in conversations, not in plans. I became the silence between their sentences. One evening, while folding the third load of laundry that wasn't mine, I opened the kitchen drawer to tuck away the tape and found an envelope addressed to me. No stamp, no handwriting, on the front. Inside was a check $2,300 memo line. To help you get started, signed with Mom's tight looping signature. My hands trembled slightly as I held it under the dull kitchen light. They thought this was a fix, a patch. A half-hearted apology signed with ink instead of voice. No conversation, no explanation, just money. As if value could be recalibrated. As if all the erased years and rerouted futures could be rounded up and resolved with a check. I placed the EMI envelope back where I found it, unfolded, unspent. They never asked if I cashed it, and I never offered an answer. That night, I withdrew half my bookstore savings and enrolled in a weekend portfolio program downtown. It was hosted in the back of an old warehouse-turned-studio. String lights curled around exposed beams. Paint-stained stools. People who didn't ask questions like, "Why didn't you finish college?" Instead, they said things like, "What's this piece about?" And for once, I had words that didn't catch in my throat. I started drawing more women, bent at angles, unfinished. A girl reaching for something she couldn't see. A figure seated across from a ghost of herself. A cradle full of stones. People asked if they were metaphors. They were. But not the kind I explained. One afternoon, Mrs. Patel at the bookstore paused while I was restocking the planner shelf. "You've been lighter," she said gently. "Did something change?" I thought about the drawing I left on the kitchen counter weeks ago, about the check in the drawer, about not cashing it, about not needing to. I stopped waiting for them to say, "Sorry," I replied. She smiled like she understood. Some people do. I walked home that evening with my sketch pad tucked under my arm and my headphones in. The house was still and golden in the late sun. Through the nursery door, left ajar, I could hear Lila talking to the baby in soft, breathy tones. A new lullaby. Another story being written that didn't include me. And this time, I didn't ache over it. I just kept walking. Past the kitchen. Past the hallway. Into the little corner of the house I'd claimed as my own. Not because they gave it to me, but because I'd taken it. The night she went into labor, no one called me. I only found out because I came downstairs to a house that felt half-breathed, still buzzing with the ghost of urgency. The front door left ajar. Mom's mug still warm. The car keys missing from the bowl. And silence. No sticky notes on the fridge. No text. No name spoken. Just a room that said, "We left. You weren't needed." I stood in the kitchen for a full minute, the hum of the fridge louder than it should have been. Then I sat at the table and made tea. The good kind. The kind I kept hidden in the back of the cupboard because Lila said herbal. Flavors made her nauseous. I drank it slowly. Let the heat curl around my fingers. Let the weight of it press into my chest like a soft, invisible hand. Later that night, I found my phone buzzing. Dad's name, followed by 2 messages. She's here. 7 pounds. Beautiful. That was it. No photo. No, you should come. Just a notification. A blinking reminder that something irreversible had happened, and that I was now further away than ever. I didn't reply. Didn't open the messages. Just turned my phone face down and picked up my sketch pad. I drew the hospital hallway from memory. Sterile walls, flickering lights, a shadow sitting alone on a plastic chair. No baby, no flowers. Just the silence between arrivals. They came home 3 days later. There were balloons tied to the gate. Pink ones, shiny, loud. The kind that tried too hard to say joy lives here now. Mom carried a cake inside, store-bought, white frosting, cursive writing. Dad wheeled in a stroller that probably cost more than my first laptop. I stayed upstairs. Didn't peek. Didn't ask to hold her. Didn't ask her name. No one offered. 2 days after they returned, Mom left a note by my pillow. She's your niece. Family. That was all. No apology. No invitation. Just an obligation dressed as affection. I pinned the note to my wall, right next to the check, right under the sketch titled, What You Took. A little gallery of things they thought I owed them. That Sunday, I skipped dinner again. Walked to the edge of the neighborhood instead. Found a bench under the sycamore tree by the old bus stop. It was nearly dark. I sat there and whispered, I exist. Just that. Soft and plain. Not for them to hear. Just so I wouldn't forget. The last morning I spent in that house was quiet. No, one knew I was leaving. The baby was crying somewhere down the hall, a high, soft whimper like the sound of something you didn't mean to drop. Mom's voice drifted through the vents, sweet and strained, a lullaby on repeat. Lila hadn't spoken to me directly in weeks. She didn't have to. The air between us was thick with what went unsaid. She'd gotten everything she wanted, and I had learned how little they thought I needed. The night before, I'd signed the lease. A studio apartment above the bakery on 7th, peeling paint. One window. A radiator that wheezed. It was mine. No shared keys. No second-hand rooms. No one tapping. On the door to ask if I could grab more formula, or run errands, or watch the baby just for a minute. It didn't have much, but it had space, and silence, and enough light to draw in. I packed quietly. Just the essentials. My sketchbooks. A kettle. A jar of cinnamon I liked. Before I left, I walked once more through the living room. The photo wall was now a shrine to Lila's new life. Her wedding, her bump, her daughter's first swaddle. Nothing of mine. Not even the old art fair ribbon I won when I was 15. I paused at the doorway, keys in hand, then turned, opened the kitchen drawer, took the check. Not to cash it, but because it was mine, because they didn't get to keep both, my future and their fiction. I left a note taped to the fridge. One line. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not coming back. No signature. They'd know. The apartment smelled like yeast and coffee. Mrs. Patel had sent me with a little box of tea bags and a note that said, "For the girl who finally chose herself." I cried when I read it. Not because I was sad, but because it was the first time someone said it like it was a victory, not a betrayal. That night, I made tea. Hung my charcoal pieces above the bed. left my phone on the windowsill, and stood by the window long enough to watch the sun go down. It didn't feel like freedom. Not exactly. It felt like mourning something I never had. But in that emptiness, there was peace. And in that peace, there was room to begin.